Hey, y'all, this is Dave Korsunski with Heads Up Health, and I'm here with a gentleman who is a good personal friend of mine and a very, very talented practitioner in many, many areas. And we are going to talk today about a lot of the recent work that he's been doing around nutrigenomics, around specific genetic variants, including MTHFR. You've put together an entire course for people who are suffering from these issues. And so I want to talk about that here today. We had a guest on the podcast recently, Carrie Brown, extreme suicidal bipolar. And the first major discovery she made herself that all of her psychiatric doctors missed was an MTHFR mutation. And she was able to start working on that through proper supplementation. And that just gave her enough healing, just enough of a break of feeling good, where she could then start working on the other aspects of health. So I know how powerful this work can be. So welcome to the show, Mr. Rosen. Give us a quick intro here, and then let's get into what you've been working on, because it's amazing stuff.
Yeah, no, it's otherwise known as the chosen one, but the Rosen one, right? So,
That'll work.
So we're producing what's called the MTHFR crash course, and she was very fortunate in the sense that looking at your genetic SNPs and only looking at MTHFR is really like reading the first chapter of Harry Potter and saying, okay, I don't need to know how this ends anymore. I've read the first chapter. It's one SNP, and there are other prioritizations ahead of MTHFR, even though MTHFR is very important, but it's very highly misunderstood. And that's why we called it the MTHFR crash course, because there just goes so much more than just your ability to convert folic into folate. That being said, though, when we first started, or when I first started in my practice, where we look at genetic susceptibilities and blood, and that's why Heads Up Health's tracking system is awesome for what we do, so that we can see data points that improve with objective measuring. You will see some important improvements with taking folate. Like, I've had patients when I first started on this, like, oh my goodness, that's what I was missing. But then you have people take folate and they get super anxious and ragey and irritable, and they can't tolerate it. So really what we did is produce a 6-week course to help people understand it's not just about enzymes that may be altered that we inherit from our mom and dad, but it also has to do with the entire roadmap. And what that means is, the analogy is the enzymes are the highways. If you have no SNPs whatsoever, Dave, it's an 8-lane highway. If you have one carrier or one parent that pass you down a SNP, which is an altered efficient ability to regenerate that enzyme, it is considered heterozygous. We would call that 4 lanes. And then if both parents give you the SNP, it's called homozygous. It's 2 lanes. So just because an enzyme is 2 lanes doesn't mean that it's messed up, right? Because let's say you're traveling on that highway at 2 o'clock in the morning, you could travel fine, or vice versa. Just because the highway is 8 lanes doesn't mean it's fine. You could be traveling at rush hour after the Super Bowl gets out and you're not going anywhere. So we want to teach everyone it's not just about the SNPs. It's not just about MTHFR. It's about everything else.
Well, that's a really powerful way to look at it all. And I think that's part of the reason with Heads Up Health that we want people to also have their blood work handy, because you do, like you said, you do need to cross-reference these things with blood work to see, okay, I've got an 8-lane highway, I've got a 2-lane highway, but is there actually a problem or not? Like, for me personally, when I test my homocysteine, which is a marker for cardiovascular risk and inflammation and things of that nature, it's off the charts high. And I do have the genetic mutation. So the next person could, if I understand what you're saying, the next person could have the same genetic variant. It's the A677T SNP, and I'm homozygous on that one. But I guess what you're saying is the next person could be homozygous and their homocysteine might be normal. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. Absolutely. And homocysteine is one of those markers where it can be pulled in two directions, meaning you could be blocked and you're not recycling homocysteine, and that's why your homocysteine goes high, Dave. But on the flip
Hmm.
side, there's no rule to say that you can't also be depleting your homocysteine to produce glutathione to put out fires at the same time. So you're being pulled in two directions, and
Hmm.
you look like your homocysteine's normal, but it's actually messed up. It's blocked and depleting, so it looks normal. And that could be a homozygous C677T, whereas yours is high. And someone could have, a very, very low one, and someone could have a normal one. So homocysteine in and of itself is not going to be the best marker for assessing that, because of that very purpose of being pushed and pulled and looking normal at the same time.
So I've had some other testing done, Dr. Joel. I've had the organic acid testing done, and that gives a very good indication of glutathione levels, and mine are normal. And so those all look good. And when I take the methylfolate, the homocysteine comes back into normal range. And so is it fair to say that if the glutathione levels are looking good on the organic acid, that it may actually be something in the methylation process that needs to be treated rather than overproducing homocysteine? We're getting really deep here. I'm just trying to put together a real world example for people about how complex this stuff is. Because like you said, and other people have told me this as well, they've said it's too easy just to treat based on a genetic variant, and that's not the right way to do it. There are other surrounding supporting factors that need to be examined holistically, and I think that's what you're saying here. And I'm just throwing out my own example to say, is my brain processing this the right way? I've got great glutathione levels, which I did through a functional test. I've got off the charts homocysteine. As soon as I take the methylfolate, it comes back from about 14 or 13 back to about 8 or 9. I forget what the units are. So am I doing it right?
Yeah, no, you're doing it right. But here's the thing. Number one, that it's the day in the life of Dave K on one day, right? When you do the organic acid test. So I see a lot of normalized glutathione levels, and I know it's not, because I have the blueprint of their genetics on my desk, and I know that they have challenges with recycling. But gene SNPs come down the pike all the time, and there's a gene SNP called KEAP1. It's a NRF2 activator. It works alongside with NRF2. So think of it like a sprinkler system. So glutathione is the water, right? KEAP1 is the sensor for the sprinkler system to go off. It's actually upstream from that. So you may not have an actual problem with your glutathione. It may be with it triggering when there's an inflammatory response. But what the course is going to be doing, Dave, is going to be telling people, based on these SNPs and based on your blood work, and based on some of the testing like organic acid, here's some other tests that I would like to run. And you would maybe want to look at fatty acid oxidation, or look at cytokine stuff, so that you can get a better indication of, all right, is this real? Like, you have to have that doubting Thomas. Like, you may know of a way that explains something, and I may know of a different way, but the reality is there's probably another 25 to 50 to an infinite other ways that all impact the biochemistry. That always makes us a little bit, it doesn't add up. Then they're taking medication on top of that, and it even confounds the waters even more,
Well, there's a lot of variables here, and that's where it gets really complicated. And that's where I'm excited about what we can start to do with machine learning and artificial intelligence in the software, where it's going to be able to just put these pieces together for us in ways that are infinitely more efficient, let's just say, because there's very few practitioners out there like yourself who understand all of the pieces. And so not everyone can get access to someone like yourself, nor maybe could they find someone like yourself or afford someone like yourself. So I'm hoping we can help on the software side to start identifying these patterns automatically and making some recommendations. But I think what you're doing is also very important, which is there's a ton of people out there who have any number of conditions related to genetic variants, like Carrie Brown, like myself. There's a lot of people in mental institutions. There's a lot of people in jails. There's a lot of people who don't feel good. And there's an answer out there by properly understanding all of this information. That's what you're putting together with the course, I would imagine, so that the everyday person, you don't need to be a doctor, but it's presented in a way where I can learn enough to be able to start asking the right questions and finding the right experts to help me. Is that a fair statement?
100%, Dave, 100%. You must have given you, like, that's exactly it. And also to, sniff the BS factor too, right? Like ask questions,
For
this,
sure.
that, and the other when you go to a doctor and, if they're dabbling or not, right? I mean, I always know if a doctor runs an MTHFR.
You can find the posers, doc.
You can. If as much as Carrie got benefit from MTHFR, I do feel it's a bit remiss to only run MTHFR. Like
I think she ran all her 23andMe data, and it was a little bit of serendipity that she saw this mutation out of all of them. And it was a little bit of serendipity that someone said, well, if you're taking, in her case, it was not a folate issue. In her case, she needed methylated B12. And that just allowed her to feel better, just a little bit better, to the point where she saw some hope. And then she was able to connect with Dr. Ted Naiman, and Dr. Ted Naiman helps take her to the next sets of levels.
Yeah. Well, with that's a couple good points there. Number one, a lot of people, when they do have a methylfolate recycling problem, or just at least a methylfolate production problem, they take B12. And my analogy is that's like putting more subs on the sideline and waiting for guys to come out of the game. The problem is the people aren't coming out of the game. Methylfolate's not coming out of the game. So you're not going to fix that by putting more B12 subs on the sideline. You need to get methylfolate out of the game. That's number one. But what I was saying is I consult with women that have a lot of infertility problems and miscarriages, and they tell me my doctor just ran only my B12, my methyl MTHFR through LabCorp, which, by the way, is a lot more money for that one test than it is to get up to, the whole gene card through Ancestry and other types of, crazy.
So let me jump in there. I want to interrupt you for a second. I apologize, but you hit on an important point. A lot of conventional doctors will say, okay, I'll run this for you, and it'll be a blood test, but it's only the MTHFR without all the other genetic tests in context, like you'd get from a good nutrition genome report or any of the other services out there. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's one of the litmus tests for the dabbler, right? Because again, they're going to say like, okay, like I'm going to help you read the first chapter of Harry Potter and let you know how the story ends based on that first chapter. That's a person that doesn't know their stuff. And that's a person who is appeasing and really saying like, look, and the only answer they're going to give you anyways is maybe they tell you folate. There's a high probability that they still tell you that you need to take high dose folate. So there's a still high probability of that too. Yeah.
Cool. So tell us where people can find the course. I know this is coming out soon, and how people can get access to it. We'll share this with Heads Up Health. I'm sure there's people out there who are maybe feeling a little overwhelmed, trying to figure this out themselves. Maybe they've already done a genetic test and they want to go back and look at their results and compare this to the information you're providing on how to interpret this stuff. So I think there's a lot of different ways the course could be helpful. What is it? Where do people find it? How do they get set up? I'll include a link actually in the show notes for this. Is that the best way to do it?
That's the best way to do it. Yep. But it starts on Tuesday, April 2nd. So it's been going for a couple of weeks now. But it starts April 2nd, which is Tuesday. We close out at Monday at 11:59 for the last call. And we run for 6 weeks. Going to be 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. And we're going to run for 6 weeks, and we are going to be doing a full curriculum from soup to nuts. We'll have PDF handouts at the end of each.
Someone is doing it with you, so it's not just you.
Dr.
Who is your
John
partner?
Thomas. Yeah, his name's Dr. John Thomas, and him and I are doing it together. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so we'll include the links for that. I'm actually really excited to get in on it myself and continue my own personal education. So I'll be that annoying guy in the background asking lots of really stupid questions. So, that's just a little heads up on that one. But if other people want to get in on this, we'll include the information. I think it's a great resource you guys are putting together. There is a cost for the program. I want to be upfront about that for people who are listening. So you can visit the website and determine if it's something that fits within your budget and your time frame. But I know your work, Doc. I know it's going to be high quality, so I'm looking forward to helping spread the word and also taking the course myself.
Yeah, no, awesome. And I'll just sort of touch on the heads up health aspect. So let's say we look at the genetic, susceptibilities, and we know that iron metabolism is a real deal breaker and histamine is a real deal breaker. And so, for example, we can track ferritin and TIBC and iron, and you can get a good, a good before and after on that. But then when you upload certain genes like the iron carrier genes or histamine lowering genes, and now we're starting to help Heads Up Health see these trends and really, like you and I have talked about over and over again, be a trendsetter for how to optimize not just your health as the data tracker, but optimize the healthcare system. When you see these SNPs, like let's say I have what's called an AOC1 or ABP1 enzyme. It's not even the DAO. It makes DAO, which eliminates histamine in the gut. You have that gene, you put that in Heads Up Health, then you also put in iron and ferritin, put that in Heads Up Health, and then you're able to start to track with nutrients that will support that, and then you start to track it again and you see the numbers going the right way. Now we've just tagged the gene with, yeah.
That is the complete money shot, and that's where people can start to see this for themselves. They can see the patterns that you're looking for right in front of their eyes. Okay, we want to look at this is what we're going to work on together, and watch the numbers improve and change and put all the pieces together. So that's why I'm really excited about doing more work with you.
Yeah, so, awesome. And you know how you mentioned, sorry to interrupt, you mentioned with Naisha Winters, which I was just blown away with when you mentioned how she's on your advisory board, and she said, hey, listen, I work with cancer patients and I would just track their data myself. And then you guys came along and reinvented the wheel and figured out, hey, we can track the data for you and we can see where things got askew and awry. Well, now there's this whole other genetic component where we actually know what the roadmap looks like. So now we can customize people's programs to say, hey, here's what you need to be looking for as data trackers because you have these genetic SNPs. And that course will teach them that, but also it will also be able to work hand in hand with Heads Up to now be able to set up profiles and tag hot genes and reverse engineer what the numbers look like from the blood work and blood tracking and all that stuff.
That's where it gets really exciting. And I think we can have a really, really positive impact on a lot of people's health when we can start finally connecting these dots for people. And again, this is largely happening outside the world of conventional medicine. This is stuff that we're facilitating through functional medicine, naturopathic, chiropractic medicine. A lot of the tools and testing are just direct to consumer. The individual goes and buys the test themselves in many cases, or through someone like yourself. But this is really kind of a movement that's being driven by individuals and functional practitioners. I don't know too many, maybe you do, but I don't know that I could go to my GP and ask him these kinds of questions. So it's a really valuable service that you're providing, and then we combine it with Heads Up Health to get all the data there, and then we just nerd out.
Yeah, exactly. And feel better, right?
Yeah.
And not have the main anxiety or suicidal or fertility or kids that are on the spectrum. We're not really talking about that important of an improvement, right? I mean, I don't know what kind of value you would put on having a child that, you know, finally smiles at you and gives you a hug, or being able to make sure that you're not going to have a stroke when you're, you know, Luke Perry's age. All these
Yeah.
things that there's no value you can put money on, right, Dave?
Become your own detective. That's just the best way we can think about it. We have the technology, we have the tools. You just have to have the will and the know-how, and you can start doing a lot of the things you described. So on that note, Doc, on this fine Friday afternoon, I will bid you adieu, and I wish you best of luck starting the course next week. I'll be there. And for others who are interested, the link is down below. And if you're
Awesome.
interested, get in on it.
Thanks for having